a problem, right?
Yep.
The glitch. Never mind. Sometimes the glitches, you can't help it. All right. Time to start the webinar. Hello and good afternoon. This is Kuntil Barua here. Welcome to another webinar by the Destination Knowledge Center. It's a very exciting one at that. Uh, it's for the first time that we are doing a webinar on sports actually, and what's better about to do the first webinar is about a game of cricket, which is not just a game, but it's almost like a religion, something that binds us all together. The game of cricket, and to tell us more about the history of Indian cricket, we have with us Devendra Prabhudesai. Devendra Prabhudesai has written 8 books on cricket, including the biographies of legendary cricketers like Sunil Gavaskar, Sachin Tendulkar, and Rahul Dravid. He was manager media relations and corporate affairs at the BCCI from 2008 to 2015. He designed India's first heritage cricket walk in Mumbai in 2017 and has anchored several functions for the BCCI and the Mumbai Cricket Association. He is presently the head corporate relations at IISN, which is Indian Sports Management Institute. Over to you, Mr. Prabhudesai.
Good afternoon, everybody. Wherever you are, it's afternoon here in Mumbai, which is why I'm wishing everybody good afternoon. It's 3:29 p.m. to be precise. So wherever you are, welcome to this presentation. I will do my best in the next 1 hour to tell you the history of Indian cricket, a game that means a lot to India. So as I would request Kuntil to assist in terms of helping with the slides, changing the slides. So here, what we are seeing on screen right now is how we Indians and in fact people across the world start playing cricket. We Indians are known to adjust and make our peace with the prevailing circumstances. So very often a torn basket doubles up as stumps, and any available open space is taken up for cricket. So this is how we start. This is how we get initiated into the game of cricket as children. Cricket is, of course, known as the game of glorious uncertainties. And I think Martin Grove, the late Martin Grove, one of the greatest batsmen to have played this game, came up with a fantastic description of cricket, a fantastic definition of cricket, if I may say. He had famously said that cricket to me offers a glimpse of the way we live our lives. And this gap in play before the next ball is bowled holds the most intrigue of all. That was Martin Grove at his eloquent best. Next slide, please.
Yeah.
So to briefly cover the origins of cricket, it was played in the English countryside in the 14th and 15th centuries. These are, of course, representational images that were clicked several centuries later with people playing those roles for the benefit of the cameras. Uh, as you can see, the appendages were a little primitive. You had a bat which looked a bit like a hockey stick to begin with. There was no middle stump, and the scoring in stark contrast to the online scoring that happens nowadays. The scoring was done by chipping a branch of wood. So if you took 1 run, 1 chip; if you took 2 runs, 2 chips, and so on. That is how it all began in the English countryside in the 14th and 15th centuries. Next. Cricket was originated in the UK, the United Kingdom, and the 17th, 18th, and 19th centuries, of course, witnessed the ascent of the British Empire, the empire where the sun never set. And as you can see in this map, the regions marked in red are those where the Union Jack held sway. And wherever the British traveled, the game of cricket traveled with them. But even they would not have realized the extent to which the game would grow in terms of popularity in the Indian subcontinent. Next. Very quickly, let's take a look at the full members of the International Cricket Council. These are, of course, the countries that play Test cricket. It all began with Australia and England, who played the inaugural test way back in 1877. South Africa was the third international team to join in 1889. The West Indies came on board in 1928, New Zealand in 1930. India joined the club in 1932. India, of course, at that time was uh, modern day India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh all together. India played her first test match in 1932. 1947, of course, saw independence for India and the creation of a new country, Pakistan. Pakistan made her test debut in 1952. Sri Lanka came on board in 1982, Zimbabwe in 1992, Bangladesh, the fourth Asian test playing nation, in 2000. And then in 2017, you saw two new countries added to the mix, Afghanistan and Ireland. So presently, there are 12 full members of the ICC, all of whom have test match status. Next. The game of cricket is probably the only one played at the highest level in as many as three different formats. So you have the multiple day format, which is played with the players wearing white. Recently, they have started wearing numbered white jerseys with their names at the back. The inaugural test match was played in 1877. And then there are two brands of limited overs cricket. One is the traditional 50 overs format, which is called one day internationals, which the first of which was played in 1971. And the first T20 international, a 3 hour, 3.5 hour entertainment bonanza, was first played at the international level in 2005. So you have the multiple day format, the 50 overs a side format, and the 20 overs a side format, all three formats played at the international level. Next. There have been 12 men's World Cups so far. The West Indies won the first two in 1975 and 1979. 1983, we will talk about that a little later as well. 1983 witnessed the biggest upset, not just in cricketing history, but I dare say in sporting history, when India defeated the mighty West Indies in the World Cup final. Australia won the World Cup for the first time in 1987. Pakistan and Imran Khan's cornered Tigers won the World Cup in 1992. Sri Lanka won it in 1996. From 1999 to 2007, Australia completed a hat trick of World Cup victories. They beat the three Asian giants in the finals. They beat Pakistan in the 99 final, India in the 2003 final, and Sri Lanka in the 2007 final. India then won the World Cup on home turf in 2011. Australia won the World Cup for the fifth time in 2015. And England won the 12th edition of the World Cup last year, one of the greatest games of cricket ever played, where they managed to uh, race ahead of New Zealand in terms of more boundaries hit on 14 July 2019. So we have had 12 World Cups so far, all of which have been played in the traditional 60 over or 50 overs a side format. Next. So now after having taken a cursory look at cricket in general, let's get right into our subject, cricket, the history of Indian cricket. A noted sociologist answering to the name of Ashish Nandi had come up with a wonderful definition of cricket. He had famously said that cricket is an Indian game which has been accidentally discovered by the British. And the events of the past few decades have provided us ample proof of this, that cricket is essentially, it always was an Indian game which accidentally happened to be discovered by the British. Can we go to the next, please? The game is played across the length and breadth of the country. The earliest recorded reference to cricket being played on Indian soil was in 1721. That is almost exactly 400 years ago, 300 years ago, where a British sailor called Downing wrote in his diary, he was part of a ship that was anchored off the Gulf of Kutch in modern day Gujarat. And he had noted in his diary that every day we diverted our attention, we distracted ourselves on the beach playing cricket and other exercises. So this was the earliest recorded reference to cricket in India, cricket being played on Indian soil. And the game has come a long way since. Next. Mumbai was the commercial capital of British India. And it was sort of the gateway to the British Empire. So, with a substantial British presence in Mumbai, it was not a surprise that Mumbai became the home of Indian cricket as well. And it is a reputation that the city continues to hold till this day. These are some images of old Mumbai, clicked more than a century ago. Here on top left, you can see the Mumba Devi temple, from which the city of Mumbai derives its name. Then you can see the docks, and then of course the Mumbai Municipal Corporation building. So cricket made its presence felt in India in a big way in the city of Mumbai. It was also played in the sepoy cantonments across the country, where the sepoys, the soldiers, saw their officers playing cricket, the British officers playing cricket, and they started imitating their masters. But when it came to civilian involvement in cricket, it really began in a big way in the city of Mumbai, the commercial, cosmopolitan, and cricketing capital of India. Next. The Esplanade ground at Mumbai, which today is referred to as the Azad Maidan. The Esplanade was where it all began, where the British stationed in Mumbai played cricket in the 19th century, and the natives, the local residents, saw them and felt like imitating the masters. So the colonized started imitating the colonizers. Next. So yes, the colonized imitated the colonizers. This was a period of time in history where India's first war of independence in 1857 had ended in defeat. The British successfully managed to squash the mutiny or the war of independence, or whatever you call it, choose to call it, depending upon which nationality you belong to. If you are an Indian, you will refer to it as the War of Independence. If you are British, you will refer to it as a mutiny. The truth, of course, as always, lies somewhere in between. Uh, that was a period when the struggle for independence had not yet started in India, and the various Indian religious communities did not really intermingle, they kept to themselves. So you had the Parsis, the Parsi community, the most affluent community based in Mumbai, which first observed the British playing the game at the Esplanade ground, and the Parsis took it upon themselves to imitate their colonial masters. Next. And then, of course, the rest is history. And now there have been lots and lots of explanations and theories thrown up over the years to explain or to tell people why cricket became so popular in India. Because the British brought with them football, hockey as well. But why did cricket, of all games, become so popular? And there have been several explanations advanced, ranging from the bizarre to the practical. So let's take a look at some of those explanations. One theory is that Indians are crazy about cricket because they are crazy about numbers and statistics. And we all know that the game of cricket gives you a lot of scope to play around with numbers and statistics. I know a few people, a few cricket crazy people who have named their bank accounts or their email IDs, or even have their passwords dedicated to some of their favorite cricketers. Like if Sunil Gavaskar scored 10,122 runs in Test cricket, there are people whose email ID reads the name followed by 10122. Or if someone is a big fan of VVS Lakshman, who famously scored 281 in a Test match against Australia, the password could just be something, the name 281. So Indians are crazy about numbers, statistics, which is why they fell in love with cricket. Another theory was that Indians are very good with their hands. Uh, you can see the evidence in terms of the opulent structures, the opulent palaces across the country, the Taj Mahal, one of the wonders of the world in the north, and the temples built in the south of the country. So Indians are very good with their hands, and cricket was all about hands. Then we come to a rather interesting explanation. Indians like to do things together, and at the same time wish that their individual contribution is also noticed and appreciated. Indians are very smart. We want to be part of a team, but we also want our individual imprint on the task assigned to us to be noticed. And cricket, of course, gives a tremendous scope in that regard, because it is individual team glory matters, but individual contribution is what contributes to team glory. And then, of course, in the 19th century, for the Indians, the cricket field provided the opportunity for them to do to the British what they had failed to do on the battlefield. So, some kind of vicarious pleasure. You could not defeat them on the battlefield, so might as well defeat them on the cricket field and feel good about it. Next. This came as a surprise to me as well when I was researching for this talk. Mahatma Gandhi, the father of the nation, apparently played a lot of cricket in his formative years. He was a dashing cricketer who evinced interest in the game as a school student. So it starts right, the craze for cricket, the fascination for cricket starts right from the top. Next. The Parsis were an affluent community. So in 1886 and 1888, the Parsis undertook two tours of England. The cricket team comprised solely Parsis, and they played several matches against local sides there. 1886, they did not do all that well, but in 1888, when they returned to England 2 years later, they did register impressive performances, including a few wins as well. So they made an impression. So this was 1886 was the first instance of an Indian cricket team making an overseas trip. Next. I was referring to vicarious pleasure. So that is precisely what happened in 1890. A team from England had come on a tour of the Indian subcontinent, and they were playing matches against the British stationed in India. But they then decided to play a 2 day match against the Parsis. They granted a match to the Parsis that, okay, you have reached a certain level in terms of your cricket, so we will play a match against you. But what happened was shocking. The Parsis actually beat that team from England. It was a 2 day game, and that was followed by a lot of celebrations, riotous behavior. It was acclaimed as a great victory. Once again, vicarious pleasure. What you cannot do to them on the battlefield, you do to them on the cricket field. Next. Many of you would have watched this film, and those who haven't watched would have heard the name of this film. It's Lagan. It was India's official entry to the Oscars in the year 2001. And it was about this group of villagers who, in the year 1893, takes on a team of Englishmen in a game of cricket and beats them. A little bit like Escape to Victory, that celebrated film which starred Sylvester Stallone, Michael Caine, and Pele, among others. A little similar. So you had Lagan made a big impression in India. It was set in 1893, and many of the characters in Lagan were inspired by real life characters. We'll come to that next. Balu Palwankar, India has had a great tradition of spin bowling. Spin bowling is considered to be one of India's greatest cricketing traditions. The person who pioneered that spin bowling tradition was Balu Palwankar. He was a left arm spinner, and he was a Hindu. As I said, in those days, the communities formed cricket teams. There was very little mixing between communities. And he obviously made a mark as a left arm spinner. And there were demands that he be included in the team of the Hindus. But he belonged to what in those days was considered the untouchable class. The Hindu religion has this caste system, and he was right. He belonged to the caste right at the bottom of the pyramid. Of course, all that does not hold, does not is not followed nowadays. It's a thing of the past, but that is what it was. And so there were many upper caste Hindus who objected to Balu Palwankar being part of the team. A little similar to the struggles that the blacks had to undergo in the US and the West. But finally, merit prevailed, and Balu Palwankar played for the Hindus and played for them very successfully. And one of his younger brothers, in fact, even went on to become the captain of the Hindu side. And one of the characters in the film Lagan, called Kachra, was based on Balu Palwankar. Like Balu Palwankar, Kachra was also a spinner, and initially the villagers do not want to include him in their team because he's an untouchable. But finally, Senar Council prevails, and in the match against the British, he actually takes a hat trick and ends up being one of the chief architects of the victory. So Balu Palwankar inspired one of the characters of Lagan. Next, please. And the other pioneer of Indian cricket from the 1890s was Kumar Shri Ranjit Singh Ji, the prince of the state of Navanagar in Western India. And he, obviously, India had no presence in world cricket at that time. So he had gone to England for higher studies, and he ended up making a huge impression there. He is believed to have invented the leg glance, which is one of cricket's most elegant strokes. There are many who consider him the father of Indian cricket for the simple reason that he was the first Indian to play Test cricket. He played for England. He was so good that England included him in their team in the Ashes series against Australia. And several years later, the Ranji Trophy, which you can see on the screen, India's premier domestic competition, was named after him. So that was K.S. Ranjit Singh ji. So you had two pioneers, one right at the bottom of the social pyramid and the other a prince, both of whom played an equally important role in adding to cricket's popularity in India. Next. Lord Harris, the governor of the Bombay province. Bombay province in those days included present-day Maharashtra, present-day Gujarat, parts of Andhra Pradesh, and parts of Sindh, which are now in Pakistan. That was Bombay province. And Lord Harris had played a lot of cricket in his youth, and he provided land in Mumbai for the three premier religious communities, the Parsis, the Hindus, and the Muslims, to establish their own gymkhanas, their own clubhouses, and play cricket there. So Lord Harris did a great turn to the people of Mumbai and India. And in fact, one of the inter-school cricket championships was named after him, and it is still played. So more than 120 years after he finished his term as governor of Bombay province, Lord Harris is still remembered in the city of Mumbai in the form of the Harris Shield, which is one of the premier inter-school cricket tournaments in the city of Mumbai. Next. What emerges is that the evolution of Indian cricket and the evolution of India, the country, India, the nation, was almost simultaneous. It was concurrent. So let's take a look at this. For the period from 1900 to 1928 was when the mass struggle for independence gained in momentum. So you had two contrasting approaches. One was the non-violent approach advocated by the Mahatma, and on the other hand, you had revolutionaries like Shahid Bhagat Singh, whom you can see on your screen. So these two contrasting approaches, made the struggle for independence a mass movement in India. And around the same time, cricket was gradually breaking the shackles of religion and caste and becoming a mass sport. Next. An annual presidency match was instituted in Mumbai between the Europeans, which is the British, and the Parsis. So in 1892, the British stationed in Mumbai felt that the Parsis had improved so much that they could play an annual match against them. So that began in 1892. In 1907, the Hindus joined with their cricket team. In 1912, the Muslims joined with their team, making this a quadrangular between four teams. And in 1937, the rest, so the religious communities that were missing out, Christians, Anglo-Indians, Jews, they put up a team called the rest. So this tournament in Mumbai came to be known as a pentangular cricket tournament. And although it was played on communal lines, a team representing one religion taking on a team representing another religion, it united the public. There was an instance in Mumbai in the 1930s when there were Hindu-Muslim riots in the city, but the riots stopped as soon as the pentangular tournament began because the people stopped fighting on the streets and went to the ground, the stadium, to watch the matches. So that is what cricket did way back then, and it continues to do even now, uniting the country. Next. 1926-27 was when a team from Britain, which was referred to as the MCC side, after the club that is the custodian of the laws of the game, they came to India to play against their British counterparts stationed in India. And they played a match against the Hindus at the Bombay Gymkhana ground. And Colonel C.K. Naidu, who you can see on the screen, whom you could term as India's Virat Kohli of the 1920s. He was India's leading cricketer of that age. He scored 153 in less than 2 hours, inclusive of 14 boundaries and 6 sixes. And that innings convinced watchers that India was now ready for the next step. The next step was to play test match cricket and become a full member of the International Cricket Conference, as it was called then. So CK Naidu's innings played a huge role in India getting test match status. But before India got test status, it was necessary to have a body, an association which would run the game in the country. Next. So that's how in 1928, the Board of Control for Cricket in India, the BCCI, where I had the great fortune of working for 7 years. It was formed in 1928. And here you can see how the logo of the BCCI has changed over the years and decades. It started with the star of the British Empire. Then it shifted to the Ashok Stambh. Then it shifted to a star in a blue and white format, and then into its present form. So the BCCI logo has changed quite a bit in the last few decades. Next. So after the BCCI was formed in 1928, the stage was set for India's debut as a test playing nation. A team was selected to tour England in 1932 and play one test match. In those days, although there was a lot of cricketing talent in the country, more importance was given to royalty, the princes, the kings. India had as many as 565 princely states, all of whom were under the crown of the British. So royalty was given a lot of importance, and the Maharaja of Porbandar, the state of Porbandar in Western India, was appointed the captain. He was a modest cricketer, but he was appointed the captain because he was a king, a prince. But on the eve of the test match, the all important game, in a magnanimous gesture, the Maharaja of Porbandar stepped aside and he decided that merit should prevail in a test match. And that is how Colonel C.K. Naidu, India's premier cricketer of the age, was given the honor of becoming India's first test captain. So in this photograph, C.K. Naidu is seated second from left, and seated third from left is the Maharaja of Porbandar, who stepped aside to allow C.K. Naidu to lead. Next. The inaugural test was a 3-day match played, which began on the 25th of June 1932. Now, Indian cricket has had a great relationship with this date of 25th June. We'll come to that later. But 25th June 1932 was when the Indians stepped on the field to play their inaugural test match. And an immediate impression was created by India's opening bowlers, Mohammad Nisar and Amar Singh. They had England in trouble very early in the test match, but inexperience cost the Indians eventually, and the more experienced England team ultimately won that game by 158 runs. But the Indian bowling and fielding was impressive, and it was praised by the seasoned watchers of Test cricket in England, particularly this new ball attack of Mohammad Nisar and Amar Singh. Next. A year later, England sent a team, the MCC, toured India to play the first three test series on Indian soil. In the photograph on the left, you can see the opposing captains, Douglas Jardine of England and C.K. Naidu of India. And Lala Amarnath, in the first test match played at the Bombay Gymkhana ground, Lala Amarnath became India's first centurion in test cricket. He scored 118 impressive runs. But once again, it was a case of individual glory amidst a collective disaster. Although Lala Amarnath scored a century, India lost that test match. Once again, it was the experience of the English that enabled them to overcome their opponents, their more inexperienced opponents. Next. 1934-35 was when the Ranji Trophy, named after Prince Ranjit Singh, was conceived, and India's premier domestic competition was established. And the first season was in 1934-35. Bombay, where the cricketing infrastructure was already in place. You had turf wickets, you had cricketers of a very high caliber there already. Bombay were the first winners. And in fact, Bombay was of course renamed Mumbai in 1995. Mumbai have won this annual tournament as many as 41 times in 86 years. The tournament is still played. Mumbai have won it 41 times. They have dominated the Ranji Trophy. These were the first winners of the Ranji Trophy. Next. The period politically for India, the period from 1928 to 1947 was one where the British practiced or tried to practice their time and tested strategy of divide and rule. So, creating a wedge between India's two most prominent religious communities, the Hindus and Muslims. And the British did their best, but thanks to freedom fighters and the likes of Mahatma Gandhi and Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose, both of whom can be seen on the slide, the British were to a large extent unsuccessful, at least initially, in their divide and rule tactics. And something similar was witnessed on the cricketing field as well. Next. When India toured England in 1936, the captain of the team, whom you see on extreme left, was the Maharaj Kumar of Vizianagaram, a hopeless cricketer, but he was the king. He was a prince, and he had vitamin M, as they say. He had money with him, so he pulled several strings and became the captain of the Indian team that toured England in 1936. Lala Amarnath, India's first Test centurion, way back in 1933, whom you can see in the center of the slide, he was sent back home on charges of indiscipline. The most talented cricketer in the team was sent back home, and you see on the right of the screen the opening pair, India's opening pair of Vijay Merchant, a Hindu, and Syed Mushtaq Ali, a Muslim. When Vijay Merchant and Syed Mushtaq Ali were in the process of creating a record opening partnership against England in the second Test match at Manchester, the Maharaj Kumar of Vizianagaram, or Vizi as he was popularly known, he called Syed Mushtaq Ali aside during one of the intervals and told him that I will give you a gold watch if you run Vijay Merchant out. The captain of a team is telling one of his players to run the other player out because Vizi did not like Vijay Merchant. Syed Mushtaq Ali turned down the offer. And when they were walking out to bat to resume their partnership, Mushtaq Ali turned to Vijay Merchant and said, Vijay, you better be careful. I am supposed to run you out. And they had a hearty laugh and they carried on batting. So imagine the sensation that something like this would have created in today's age of the paparazzi and the breaking news. The captain of a team trying to bribe one player to harm the other. That was what Indian cricket was all about. But this attempt to divide and rule, the busy trying to imitate the British, that also failed. Can we go to the next one? Many Indian cricketers are superstars today, not only on the field but also off the field. They are brand ambassadors. They endorse many products, diverse products. Colonel C.K. Naidu was probably India's first brand ambassador, cricketing brand ambassador. This is an advertisement from the 1930s where he was endorsing a liver tonic. This advertisement appeared in the newspapers and on hoardings across the country, where he was supposed to have said, I have found that a morning dose of Bathgate's liver tonic banishes sluggishness and keeps me 100% fit for the day's play. I recommend it to all cricketers and, in fact, to all sportsmen. So, C.K. Naidu, the model, the brand ambassador. Next. Luckily, India was spared the horrors of World War II, and domestic cricket continued in India uninterrupted during the war years. But the prominence that bowlers enjoyed till then was slowly then taken up by the batsmen. And you had Vijay Merchant and Vijay Hazare, two cricketers with the same name, engaged in a battle for one-upmanship. Vijay Merchant played for the Hindus and Mumbai, and Vijay Hazare played for the rest in the Pentangulars, and he also played for Baroda and Maharashtra at a point. And if Vijay Merchant would make a big score, Vijay Hazare would better that in the next game. Vijay Merchant would then better Hazare score in the game after that. And there was this battle between the two Vijays. And that sort of established the prominence and the rule of the batsman. And ever since then, India has been predominantly a batting nation. There have been scores of great bowlers produced by this country, but the batsmen have always enjoyed exalted status in this country. A little unfortunate, but that is how it is. Next. Well, the divide and rule of the policy of the British did not succeed initially, but ultimately it did. And in 1947, the joy of independence was offset by the trauma of partition. So you had two new countries being formed, India, and then there was West Pakistan and East Pakistan, both on either sides of India. There were people who migrated from one country to the other. There were riots, there was arson, many innocents perished. And from the cricketing point of view, India lost a lot of its cricketers because they happened to be on the Pakistani side of the border. So a lot of good bowlers, for example, ended up on the Pakistani side of the border, and India lost quite a few cricketers as a result of the partition. Next. This is, of course, Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, India's first prime minister, and he had played a bit of cricket during his student days at Harrow in the UK, and when he became prime minister, he played in a few charity matches. So 1947 to 1970 was all about the India, the country, finding a foothold. We had just become independent after centuries of colonial rule. So the country was trying to make its presence felt, trying to find a foothold. And with Indian cricket, it was the same thing. We had become independent, but as I said, we had lost a lot of good players to another country. So it was once again a question of going back to square one, and trying to find a foothold in the cricketing world. Next. Some of the prominent cricketers of that phase were Vinu Mankad, a great all-rounder, Paulie Umrigar, the first Indian to score 3,000 runs in Test cricket, and then Subhash Gupte, the leg spinner. Of Subhash Gupte, it is said that Gary Sobers, Sir Gary Sobers, the greatest cricketer of all time, had once said very recently that Subhash Gupte was a better leg spin bowler than Shane Warne. And when a cricketer of Gary Sobers' stature makes a statement like that, you have no option but to take it seriously. Unfortunately, there is no footage available of his, but so these were the three prominent cricketers of that time, of the time 1950s. Vinu Mankad, a great all-rounder, opening batsman and a left-arm spinner. Paulie Umrigar, uh, India's first 3,000-run man in Test cricket, and Subhash Gupte, the great leg spin bowler. Next. The 1960s was a turbulent decade for India. The country witnessed two wars, one against China in 1962 and the other against Pakistan in 1965. So it was a turbulent decade, and there was a lot of turbulence in Indian cricket as well, because you had Mansoor Ali Khan Pataudi, whose father had played for both England and India in his youth. Mansoor Ali Khan Pataudi, or Tiger Pataudi as he is popularly known, was a true conqueror of adversity. He lost an eye. He lost an eye in a road accident during his student days in England. But he returned to the cricket field and went on to score nearly 3,000 runs in Test cricket with just one good eye. And it was he who, as captain, brought together, created the nucleus of a team that was then that went on to scale unprecedented heights in subsequent decades. The 1960s also saw the advent of India's great spin quartet, the four great spin bowlers who bowled the country to many a victory in India and overseas with their powers of deceit and deception in the air, and their the ease at which they could flick their fingers and flick their wrists and make the cricket ball do all kinds of things to leave opposition batsmen groping and totally bewildered with their deceit and deception. So on your left, you can see Chandrasekhar. Next to him is Venkat Raghavan, then Bishan Singh Bedi, and Erapalli Prasanna. These were India's four great spinners of the 1960s. Chandrasekhar was a right-arm leg spinner. Venkat Raghavan and Prasanna were both right-arm off spinners, and Bishan Singh Bedi was a left-arm spinner. So these were India's greats of that period. Next. 1971 was a watershed year in politics and cricket for India. At the end of 1971, India and Pakistan fought another war, and it ended in a conclusive victory for India. More than 90,000 Pakistani soldiers surrendered at Dhaka and in East Pakistan, and a new country was born, Bangladesh. And in cricket, in the same year, the Indian cricket team toured West Indies and England and won both the series on foreign soil, something that had never been done before. Under the captaincy of Ajit Wadekar, India first went to the West Indies, won the series 1-0, then went to England and won the series there 1-0. So you could say that Indian cricket came of age in 1971. And it is often said that these cricket teams that went to the West Indies and England had they comprised the first generation of Indians who were born in independent India post 1947. So they did not have an inferiority complex. They considered themselves second to none, and they never took a backward step. And it was this attitude that helped in their not being intimidated or overawed by their opponents. And they went on to beat first the West Indies and then England. Next. When the team won in England and returned to India, it was accorded a ticker tape welcome in Mumbai. So you had a motorcade, and Ajit, in this photograph, you can see Ajit Wadekar, the captain, driving through the streets of Bombay, and people showering him with petals. That is how the team was welcomed. And one reason why the twin wins of 1971 are unparalleled is because India did not have a single fast bowler in the playing 11s. It is inconceivable to imagine a cricket team winning a series without fast bowlers. It was only the spinners and the batsmen who won those two series. And this achievement has absolutely no parallels in cricketing history. Next. A diminutive opening batsman from Mumbai who made his debut in that series in the West Indies. The 1970s, that decade belonged to him. He answered to the name of Sunil Manohar Gavaskar. He was India's first world-beating cricketer. He broke record after record after record. Uh, the first batsman to break the 10,000 run barrier in Test cricket. The first five-figure man in Test cricket. And his greatest contribution, more than the runs he scored and the records he broke, was the fact that he taught Indian cricket to believe in itself. That was Sunil Gavaskar's greatest contribution. No longer did the Indian public regard even a draw as a victory. They started expecting victories. They started expecting their team to do well. And the standards, the bar was raised high by Sunil Gavaskar. So he was India's first cricketing legend, if you may call him as one. Next. The little master Sunil Gavaskar was complemented by another little master named Gundappa Vishwanath. So these were India's two main batsmen of the 1970s. Incidentally, both of them are brothers-in-law in real life. Vishwanath married Gavaskar's younger sister. So they are also bound by family, and they brought a lot of glory to the Indian team, both at home and overseas in the 1970s. Next. In the latter half of the 1970s, we saw a new generation emerge. Syed Kirmani, the wicketkeeper, Dilip Vengsarkar, and Mohinder Amarnath. There were other people like Sandeep Patil, Yashpal Sharma as well. What was significant about this new generation of Indian cricketers was that the one day game, the one day cricket had captured everybody's imagination by then. But unlike their predecessors who were a little uncomfortable playing limited overs cricket, they were finding it difficult to adapt their game to the limited overs variety. This new generation seemed quite equally comfortable in one day limited overs cricket as well as the multiple day cricket. So whether it was Dilip Vengsarkar, Mohinder Amarnath, Sandeep Patil, Yashpal Sharma, Krishnamachari Shrikant, all these cricketers, one day cricket to them was like water off a duck's back. They were equally comfortable playing one day cricket as they were playing multiple day cricket. And the greatest of the lot was, next please, this man called Kapil Dev Nikhanj. He was an all-rounder. He shifted the emphasis of India's bowling from spin to pace. For years, India had not seen a fast bowler making opposition batsmen hurry with their shots. But in Kapil Dev, India finally had a potent weapon with the new ball at the start of an innings. And he was also an equally explosive batsman. India's greatest all-rounder and possibly India's greatest cricketer ever. Kapil Dev Nikhanj went on to play a huge role in the decade that followed. Next. 1983, as I said at the start of this presentation, probably the greatest upset not only in cricketing history but in sporting history. India had done very poorly in the first two World Cups in 1975 and 1979. So in 1983, nobody gave Kapil Dev's team a chance. Kapil Dev was captain by then. But India surprised even Indians. Even we were surprised, pleasantly surprised, that our team first made it to the semi-finals and then the finals. But in the final, we were up against the mighty West Indies, two-time winners of the World Cup. But the unthinkable, the unbelievable happened. India beat the West Indies at the Lord's Cricket Ground and were crowned world champions. In fact, a film has been made on this episode. It was to be released in April 2020, but it was unfortunately postponed because of the pandemic. But it should hit the theaters once things return to normalcy. Next. So as I said, 1983 World Cup final, cricket's greatest upset and probably the most significant game of cricket ever played. Why? I will explain. India had color TV. India had black and white television till 1982. And color television came to India with the Asian Games that were hosted by India in 1982. And the national network started where the entire country saw the same television programs together. And within 6 months of that happening, The entire country together watched the 1983 World Cup final on television live. We watched our heroes win the World Cup. And what happened after this match, or rather on the eve of the final, or the 83 World Cup final, was that the president of the BCCI, Mr. NKP Salve, made a special request to the MCC, which of course ran Lords, for a couple of extra tickets for the final, because obviously India was playing the final. So the president of the BCCI requested for a couple of extra tickets to be delivered to the Indian ambassador in the UK. And the MCC, for whatever reason, snubbed him. They denied that request. NKP Salve was not very happy with the snub. And then, of course, India went on to win the 1983 World Cup final. A couple of days after the 1983 World Cup final, Mr. NKP Salve ran into his Pakistani counterpart, Air Marshal Noor Khan. And both of them thought out aloud, why should England always host the World Cup? Who has given them this right to host every World Cup? Why can't India and Pakistan come together to host the World Cup? And before one realized it, India and Pakistan made a joint bid to host the next World Cup in 1987. Several people in England, Australia, New Zealand, wherever else, laughed, mocked, ridiculed the capacity, the capabilities of both the countries. They said that two countries that have been at war with each other thrice, how can they work on a World Cup together? But India and Pakistan had the last laugh. Next.
Just yeah, just give me a moment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There were many people who could not believe the fact that India had won the World Cup in 1983, and they branded the victory as a fluke, a one-off. You know, it happens. The West Indies had one bad day, and that's how they lost. But 18 months after the 1983 World Cup win, India proved that the 83 World Cup win was not a fluke, because pretty much the same bunch of players went on to win the World Championship of Cricket in Australia. 8 members of the 83 World Cup team were also members of this team. And they won the World Championship of Cricket in Australia, which was like a mini World Cup with all the test playing nations participating. This time, Sunil Gavaskar was the captain. And Ravi Shastri, who currently is the coach of the Indian cricket team, was declared the champion of champions. And he was awarded this very impressive Audi car, which created a big sensation back in India, because we were not used to seeing foreign cars on our streets. So 1985 was when India won the World Championship of Cricket and proved that 1983 was not a fluke. Next. So as I mentioned, India Pakistan co-hosted the 1987 World Cup. It was hoped by many that the co-hosts would make it to the final, but unfortunately for Indian and Pakistani cricket lovers, Pakistan lost to Australia in the semi-final at Lahore, and India lost to England in the semi-final at Bombay. And Australia played England in the final at the Eden Gardens. And when they took the field, the Australians were pleasantly surprised that 99.99% of the capacity crowd of 100,000 were supporting them. The Australians had been adopted as the home team, obviously because the Indians did not want England, their former colonial masters, to win. So Australia was adopted as the home team. And much to the delight of the spectators, Australia beat England in that final by 7 runs and won the World Cup for the first time. So this is a photograph of the Australian team led by the great Alan Border. Next. 1988, A Tale of Two Schoolboys. So when Sunil Gavaskar announced his retirement in 1987, and people were wondering what would happen to Indian batting. Would we get another superstar like him? And within 2 months of his retirement, we had got the answer. Two schoolboys added a record 664 runs in an inter-school match in Mumbai. And the one on the right is, of course, familiar to us all. His name was Sachin Tendulkar. So along with Vinod Kambli, Sachin added 664 runs in an inter-school match, and both became household names across the country. And from then on, it was only a matter of time before both played for the country. And Sachin, in fact, made his debut for India at the age of 16. And of course, he's gone on to become an absolute legend. Vinod Kambli had his stint with the Indian team, but he was let down by a combination of poor form and a little bit of bad luck. But Sachin, of course, he went on to receive the Bharat Ratna, India's highest civilian honor, at the end of his career. About Sachin Tendulkar, of course, there's nothing to be said really. Next. 1991 was a watershed year, much like 1971, because for the first time since independence, the Indian economy was opened up to foreign competition, and the skies were opened up to satellite television. So, which is why I have deliberately put in an image of a satellite dish. And South Africa ended 22 years of apartheid, and it was quite appropriate that they returned to international cricket with a short three-match series against India, the country that had proposed their re-entry into the International Cricket Council. So 1991 was a very significant year because the Indian economy got opened up. Suddenly, you had attitudes changing. The average Indian, the skies had opened up. Uh, Occupations, vocations had opened up. Suddenly, we were seeing foreign brands in our market. We were seeing foreign cars on our streets. And when where the traditional outlook towards life was there were only three or four occupations or professions that were pursued by everybody, like medicine, engineering, chartered accountancy, and probably law. Suddenly, you had youngsters aspiring to be sports persons, aspiring to be models, aspiring to be entertainment personalities. So everything changed in the 1990s with the onset of liberalization. Next. And that the extent to which things got opened up and the change in the attitude was visible even on the cricket field. Sachin Tendulkar and Anil Kumble were the two cricketers who made India invincible at home on home turf in the 1990s. Sachin was, of course, the batting supremo, and Anil Kumble was unplayable as a leg spin bowler. And both made India a superpower, cricketing superpower on home soil. We did have a reputation of being tigers at home and lambs abroad. And that unfortunately stayed with India for a few years after that. Next. A new middle order emerged in 1996. So till 1996, it had been Sachin Tendulkar, Anil Kumble, and nine others as far as the Indian team was concerned, especially when the team toured overseas. The team would invariably flop on foreign soil. But in 1996, you had Saurav Ganguly, Rahul Dravid, and VVS Lakshman joining the team. And from then on, the stage was set for the start of a golden age for India in Test cricket. Next. 2001. So now we come to the new millennium. The Indian economy was growing. There was an IT boom across the country. India had its own Silicon Valley in Bangalore, south of India. And a golden age in cricket began. The Australian team toured India in early 2001. Steve Waugh, the Australian captain, had said that his ambition was to conquer the final frontier, which was India. Australia had not won a series in India since 1969. But the Australians were outsmarted and outwitted by VVS Lakshman, Rahul Dravid, and Harbhajan Singh. VVS Lakshman and Rahul Dravid with the bat, and Harbhajan Singh with the ball. That victory against Australia in 2001 witnessed the start of India's golden age in Test cricket. Next. These were the stars of that golden age: Zaheer Khan with the ball, Virender Sehwag, that maverick opening batsman, and of course Yuvraj Singh. They rendered yeoman service to India during that decade. Next. The biggest difference between the 20th century and the 21st century was winning matches abroad. From 1932, when we played our first test, to 1999 in the 20th century, India had won only 13 matches abroad, which was an embarrassing statistic. But in the first 10 years of the new millennium itself, the team won 20 matches abroad. And the seniors were now being supported by youngsters who had grown up in the age of liberalization. They had watched cricket and other programs from across the world on satellite television. They were ambitious, confident, and not averse to taking risks. There was a point of time in India in the previous century where you saved every single penny that you earned. What would happen on a rainy day. But now in the new India, the emphasis was on living life king size, spending rather than saving. So that was the new India. Next. And of course, Saurav Ganguly as captain of India made a huge impression. The photograph on the left of the screen best typifies Saurav Ganguly. When England toured India earlier in 2002, and they squared a series in Mumbai. Andrew Flintoff, England's all-rounder, took off his shirt and did a jig at the Wankhede Stadium. Saurav Ganguly did not forget that. And at Lords in July 2002, when India won the Tri-Series, Saurav Ganguly paid Andrew Flintoff back with interest on the Lords balcony. And a year later, India retained the Border Gavaskar Trophy, which is given to the winner of series between India and Australia in 2003-2004. So this is a nice photograph where you can see Saurav Ganguly receiving the Border Gavaskar Trophy from Border and Gavaskar, the two people after whom this trophy was named. Next. India won series in Pakistan and England during this first decade. Next. 2007 was the year of the turnaround. At the start of the year, the Indian team was eliminated in the very first round of the 2007 World Cup, which was played in the Caribbean. But within 6 months, a new team, a young team, went on to win the first ever 2020 World Cup. So March 2007 represented the absolute brink, the nadir of Indian cricket. But September of the same year witnessed the ascent of Indian cricket in terms of winning the first ever 2020 World Cup at Johannesburg in South Africa. Next. A fresh batch of youngsters came up in the mid 2000s. Gautam Gambhir, the opening batsman, Ishant Sharma, the fast bowler, and of course Mahendra Singh Dhoni, who has been a very successful captain and has led India to a lot of glorious deeds on the cricket field. Next. In 2011, beg your pardon, India under the captaincy of Mahendra Singh Dhoni became the world champions for the second time. The Sri Lanka were beaten in the World Cup final of 2011 at the Wankhede Stadium. So India won that World Cup on home turf, the final played on home turf. And Sachin Tendulkar in his sixth World Cup finally got to touch the World Cup winning trophy. Next. 2008 saw the advent of a phenomenon, the Indian Premier League, the IPL. This image, of course, has the logos of the current teams, but there were 8 teams to begin with as well. And the IPL captured the imagination of the masses. It caught on like wildfire. Nobody had expected the IPL to become the kind of runaway success that it had in its very first year. And today we find that the IPL is one of India's biggest brands. Next. It has captured the imagination of the masses. Presently, of course, we know that we are all aware that it is being played in the UAE because of the pandemic situation in India. But the IPL has only gone from strength to strength over the past 12 years. Next. The IPL added a new word to the dictionary called cricketainment. It was a combination of cricket and entertainment. And you had industrialists, corporate giants all joining the bandwagon and owning teams. And the IPL has, in fact, given a great fillip to overall sport in India because the IPL inspired other sports in India to start their own leagues. Like today, you have a league in football, you have a league in the Indian game of kabaddi, you have a volleyball league, you have a table tennis league. So the IPL was a pioneer in that aspect. Next. The BCCI has been very proactive in terms of developing the infrastructure and the world's most robust junior cricketing structure. The Indian team has always been successful in the under 19 World Cups. So the bench strength has always been very strong. This image on the left is of the cricket stadium at Dharamshala at the foothills of the Himalayas, one of the most breathtaking cricket stadia you can come across because you can see the snow-laden peaks in the background. It's absolutely breathtaking. And that is the extent to which the game has spread across the length and breadth of the country. Next. So from being a sidekick, the BCCI today generates 70 to 80% of the game's revenue. And that has led to a certain confrontation with the ICC, the parent body of the game, where the BCCI has been demanding a greater say in the revenue, greater share in the revenue. So that battle is ongoing. Let's hope that everything turns out for the best. Next. Why is cricket India's number one sport? It's all due to a combination of results on the field and efficient administration of the field. As I said, infrastructure development, every domestic team has the best of facilities. And very critically, the BCCI looks after its former international cricketers and umpires. Also, the widows of former cricketers are well looked after. They're given a substantial pension every month. So the cricketers are being looked after very well. that has also added to the confidence in cricketers. Next. So today, we find that cricket in India has truly become a national sport. Till the end of the 20th century, cricket was predominantly an urban sport. So you had three players from Mumbai, three from Bangalore, two from Chennai, two from Delhi, and that was it. But today you have cricketers coming from all over the country. Mahendra Singh Dhoni comes from the city of Ranchi, which is the capital of Jharkhand. Ranchi was never known for its cricket, but that is what has happened in recent times. The BCCI has extensively focused on grassroots and infrastructural development. And the media has helped, of course, but what has helped more than anything else is the fact that every generation has produced icons. And the icons of one generation invariably end up inspiring the icons of the succeeding generations. And that relay the baton has been passed on from one generation to the other. It continues. Next. Let's take a look at some of the current stars. You have Virat Kohli, you have Rohit Sharma. They need no introduction. Next. Cheteshwar Pujara, Ravichandran Ashwin, the off spinner. Next. Jasprit Bumrah, Mohammad Shami. These are cricketers who are currently the mainstays of our national team and are doing very well. Next. And they all combined spectacularly in Australia in 2018-19. India won that test series on Australian soil. The first time India had won a series in Australia. And we cannot wait for the series against Australia to begin in the month of November, next month, in fact. And it is hoped that the Indian team will again do very well, down under. Next. Women's cricket in India is also on the upswing. It all started with a Parsi lady from Mumbai called Alu Bamji, who founded a club for lady cricketers called Albies in the early 70s in Mumbai. One of her students was Diana Edilji, who went on to become a cricketing legend. And the Women's Cricket Association of India merged with the BCCI in the year 2006. And the merger with the BCCI gave the women cricketers access to the best of facilities, best of training, and the best of grounds. So women's cricket is doing very well. The lady in the picture is Jemima Rodrigues, also a teenage prodigy like Sachin Tendulkar was. And we are all hoping that she goes on to achieve a lot in the years to come. Next. India's two most famous lady cricketers are Mithali Raj, the batswoman, and Jhulan Goswami, the new ball bowler. They have both represented India with distinction for over 15 years. Next. So that brings us to the end of this presentation. A lot has changed in 300 years, beg your pardon, not 400. A lot has changed in 300 years. The cluster of kingdoms and princely states, which was then converted into a British colony called British India, is today the world's largest parliamentary democracy and one of the world's fastest growing economies. But there is one constant from 1721 to 2020, there has been one constant. Next. Cricket has always united the nation. It has always brought the nation together. Apart from the army, navy, and air force of this country, if there is anything that unites the country, it is the game of cricket. Thank you very much. That brings me to the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Prabhudesai, for that lovely presentation. Lovely for taking us on the journey on the history of Indian cricket. I've been getting WhatsApp messages about how people are enjoying this. We have a couple of questions.
Yes,
we would
please.
like to take now.
Yes.
Joginder Deswal is asking, dear Mr. Prabhudesai, thanks a lot. So much knowledge. Thanks a lot for sharing so much knowledge about interesting topic on cricket.
Thank you.
Congratulations for the biographies of the three legends. Do you think that you will end up writing biographies of Sourav Ganguly, Yuvraj Singh, or Virat Kohli?
So biographies of Sourav and Virat have already been written, and Virat, let's see, he's still doing well. Let's give him a few more years, and maybe after he finishes his career, who knows? If I'm lucky enough to get the opportunity, I would definitely like to write a book on him.
Right. Sanjay Druga is asking, hello, Mr. Prabhudesai, thanks for this session. Farooq Engineer has been one of our regular clients in the past.
Okay.
And he was a dashing Indian cricketer. When did he enter into this cricket game? Can you tell us more about Farooq Engineer?
Farooq Engineer spent his childhood in Mumbai, and he was a student of Podar College in central Mumbai. And he then made his Ranji Trophy debut for Mumbai in the late 50s. He made his Test debut for India in the early 60s. And as mentioned, he was a prolific batsman and a wicket keeper. He was in many ways a precursor to Adam Gilchrist and Mahendra Singh Dhoni. He was a dashing batsman who did not hesitate to take the aerial route. He loved to attack the bowling, and he was brilliant behind the wickets as the wicket keeper. And his consistency led him to win a county contract with Lancashire in England. So I think he shifted to the UK in the early 70s. And he's still living in the UK, although he very frequently comes to India and he attends a lot of functions. And he is charismatic. Yeah, I mean, one of the most loved Indian cricketers of all time, Farooq Engineer.
Right. Anupam Khare is asking that how come India is the richest cricketing? How come India has the richest cricketing board in the world? How come like we are so rich? Would you?
Well, it was a classic case of fortune favoring the brave. So starting with 1983, the World Cup win, things just we just went from strength to strength. Now there's a very interesting story. For years and years, India did not know the significance of television rights. Okay, so I referred in my presentation to South Africa coming out of the embargo by playing a short series against India in 1991. Now, what happened is that when the South African tour was confirmed, the South African Broadcasting Corporation contacted the BCCI and they said that, look, this is a big series for us because we are coming back after 22 years. So we want to televise the matches in South Africa. So we would like to buy the TV rights from you. The BCCI did not even know that the rights because at that point of time, the BCCI used to pay. It seems unbelievable today, but the BCCI used to pay Doordarshan, the official government broadcaster, to cover cricket matches. So when South Africa made that offer, the BCCI did a little bit of research and they realized that, oh my God, the rights belong to us. We own the rights. And then they said, okay, now what they want to buy the rights. How much do we charge? How much do we quote? Because the BCCI had no idea. So they said, let's throw a figure of $20,000 at South Africa. What happened is before BCCI threw the figure of $20,000 at South Africa, the South Africans quoted $200,000, 10 times the amount that the BCCI had in mind. And that sort of was a turning point. BCCI realized that they're sitting on a gold mine. Television rights just changed the entire landscape. Then a few years later, Doordarshan was told that you cannot cover matches in India as your birthright. If you want to cover, bid like all the other corporations bid. And that is how it all began. 1996 World Cup, you saw, so the 1996 World Cup was played in India. Again, there was a battle for television rights. And ever since then, the game has just gone from strength to strength. And India has performed on the cricket field. You can do all the, machinations behind the scenes. You can make a lot of money. You can try to make a lot of money, but ultimately your efforts off the field have to be complemented by performance on the field, which India did. And that is why it's been a combination of consistency on the field and consistency and efficient management of the field, which is why India and the BCCI are so rich.
Uh, Fairaj Khan is asking, what is your favorite moment of Indian cricketing history?
My favorite moment?
Yeah.
There are several, but having witnessed it in the flesh, I mean, I was there when it happened. I think Mahendra Singh Dhoni's 6 at the Wankhede Stadium, with which we won the World Cup in 2011. That would be my favorite moment. I've seen a lot of great moments on the television, but this moment I actually saw. I was there at the Wankhede Stadium to witness it. So I think that would qualify for being my most favorite moment.
Right. We have another question from Joginder Deshwal, who's a good bowler as well, and he is very passionate about cricket. He's asking, what went wrong with the Indian team in 2003 and maybe in 1987 as well? What do you think
I
went
think
well?
the 2003 World Cup final, the way India was playing in 2003, only one team could have beaten India. And unfortunately for India, that team turned out to be their opponent in the final because the Australians were clinical, they were ruthless, they were professional. And I think the Indians were also clinical and professional, but on the given day, the Australians were just better. And we all remember the innings that Ricky Ponting played. It was a fantastic innings. And in 1987, of course, in the semi-final against England, which we lost, there were a few early wickets that we lost, and the middle order really could not match up to the challenge. And that is how we ended up losing matches. But that's part of life. I mean, we have won the World Cup twice, and we have won the 2020 World Cup once. So I think we should focus on that.
Right. In your view, Ganesh Shankar is asking, which is the most memorable and best innings in one-day cricket played by any Indian batsman in your view?
If you ask me, once again, I would say the 98 that Sachin scored against Pakistan in the 2003 World Cup. That the second over where he first hit Shoaib Akhtar for a six over third man, and then flicked him for a six for a boundary to mid wicket, and then defended the next ball, but he timed it so well that the ball still went to the boundary. And for my generation who had watched Javed Miandad hit that last ball six of Chetan Sharma, I watched it on television. I can still remember that moment. I think Sachin's 98 against Pakistan sort of exorcised the demons of 1986. So Sachin, if I'm asked to pick one favorite innings, it would be Sachin's 98 against Pakistan in 2003, the 2003 World Cup.
Vipin is asking, thank you, Devendra ji. If I'm not wrong, cricket is one of the games which holds records of having the most records.
Yes.
Do you, if you have to kind of do a chronology, what would be the top five most astonishing records in cricket history?
I think beginning with 10 wickets in an innings, which Jim Laker of England and Anil Kumble of India have achieved, 10 wickets in an innings, a quadruple century by Brian Lara. Then I think here again I'm a little biased because Sunil Gavaskar was my childhood hero and later on my boss when I grew up. He scored 10,000. He became the first batsman to score 10,000 runs. He was an opening batsman who played without a helmet against the fastest and fiercest bowlers in history. So I think somebody to score 10,000 runs in the 1970s and 80s, where there were lots of fast bowlers across the world, was an astonishing achievement. And after that, I think Australia's dominance of the World Cups. I think five World Cups which Australia have won, including three consecutive victories in 99, 2003, and 2007. Those would qualify. And the one astonishing stat to beat all astonishing stats is Don Bradman, who averaged 99.94 in Test cricket, which means that he scored 100, or nearly 100 every time he batted in a Test match. That is one record that will never be broken. Don Bradman's 99.94 mark will never ever be achieved. All other records can be equaled, but Bradman's can never be equaled.
Right. Naveen Kantwal is asking a very difficult question, I'm sure. Who is your favorite Indian cricketer?
Sunil Gavaskar, my childhood hero.
Right. And
Sunil Gavaskar,
why do you say so?
childhood hero. The people you look up to when you are a child, they are the ultimate in your view. And as I said, he gave us self-respect. He taught Indian cricket to believe in itself. All the records that he established. So if I am asked to pick one cricketer, it has to be Sunil Gavaskar.
And he wrote his biography,
I did
right?
write his biography. I also worked under his company for a few years after that.
Right. Sir, we keep on hearing about this thing, Nitin Sharma's question. We keep on hearing about this word match fixing in cricket. Is there any shred of truth in it? Does match fixing exist?
Of course, there was in the 1990s was a dark decade. You had the Hansi Cronje revelation in the early 2000s, and then all the skeletons came tumbling out of cupboards the world over. The BCCI was very proactive in setting up an inquiry committee, and then the CBI also launched an investigation. In fact, if you are interested, you should read the CBI's report on cricket match fixing and related malpractices. It is freely available on the net. You can go through it. It will just tell you what actually used to go on behind the scenes. And this is one of the reasons why I get very defensive and I get a little upset when people start running down Sachin Tendulkar's ability as a captain. Because, it is believed, many people say, oh, Sachin Tendulkar was a great cricketer. But as a captain, look at his record. What a poor record he had as captain. But my response to that is, what can a captain do if two or three of your players have other priorities? If they are on the rolls of bookies, what can a captain do? What could Sachin have done? So ultimately, I think action was taken and the people found guilty Some of them were banned for life. Some of them were banned for 5 years. And I think after that, we saw the people like Saurav Ganguly, Rahul Dravid, VVS Lakshman achieving maturity, and Indian cricket just went on to unprecedented heights. In fact, the talk of match fixing brings me to what I believe is the greatest ever tribute that can be paid to any sports person. Sachin Tendulkar, in his illustrious career, has been paid lots of tributes. Bradman said that he reminds me of myself. Matthew Hayden had once said that I have seen God and he bats at number 4 for India. Lots and lots of people have paid tributes to Sachin. But the ultimate tribute, in my view, to Sachin was paid by a bookie who was arrested by the CBI in 2000. This bookie, and I'm getting goose pimples as I say this. This bookie, and it's on record. It's very much a part of that report that I was referring to, which is freely available on the net. This bookie told his interrogators that the match fixing process would start only after Sachin Tendulkar got out, because as until he was on the field, he could upset all their fixing plans. Greatest tribute. You cannot possibly get a bigger tribute to a sports person.
Perfect. And we
Not
have
only, not only were the bowlers scared of Sachin, but even the bookies were scared of Sachin.
yeah, we have another question on Sachin Tendulkar, sir. Sachin Tendulkar desert storm innings at Sharjah.
Oh yes.
I mean, he just wants you to talk a little bit about it, your views. What do you think? That
Well,
was phenomenal, you know.
yes. So we had been given a revised target because there was a sandstorm,
Yeah.
and Sachin has mentioned that when the storm broke out, everybody was lying flat on the ground, and at one stage he seriously considered hanging on to Adam Gilchrist, the Australian wicketkeeper, lest he get blown away. But then they had to go back to the pavilion because the sandstorm persisted for a while. And Sachin did not take off his helmet. He was just standing ramrod straight. And then he just went out and he said that and India had to score a certain number of runs to qualify for the final. So it really did not matter if we lost that match. I think if memory serves me right, we needed 240 or to qualify. The winning target, we were set a target of 270 or something, but even 240 would have enabled us to qualify for the final of that tournament. So everybody expected Sachin to play for 240. That okay, you just ensure that India qualifies for the final. But this man went for 270, and he just the kind of strokes he played. It was like watching God in action. It was an unbelievable night. Sorry.
Unbelievable innings, are true. Vipin Nayal is again asking, so cricket, why is it not a part of the Olympics? It was once upon a time. Why it is not part of the Olympics?
I think the nature of the game, the way it is structured, multiple day format obviously will be a little out of place in the Olympics. Although I now believe that with 2020 there is a very valid case for cricket making an all-out bid to be part of the Olympics, because the 2020 format, you can maybe squeeze in that in a 15-day Olympic extravaganza. So I think 2020 is Olympic friendly, but the multiple format, the multiple day format, it's unrealistic to expect it to be part of the Olympics.
Right. Pallab Shukla is asking your views on Saurav Ganguly as the captain of Indian cricket history.
India's greatest captain ever.
Wow. Wow.
Again, when he took over as captain, the credibility of a game was at an all-time low. The match fixing controversy had happened. So I know many die-hard cricket lovers who had stopped watching cricket after the match fixing thing, Hansi Crony, all that. But Saurav Ganguly as captain, along with of course Sachin, Rahul, Lakshman, Anil Kumble, Zahir Khan, he sort of restored the credibility of Indian cricket. He brought Indian cricket out of choppy waters.
And
And so
and he was
India's
and he was not
greatest.
afraid, and he was not afraid to be
And he was
aggressive on
not
the
afraid.
field.
He backed his players. And he is responsible for many of the players, in fact, making their debuts and going on. There's a great story about Harbhajan Singh in 2001 when the Australians were to tour India. Harbhajan Singh had been rusticated from the National Cricket Academy, and he had thought that his career is over. He was planning to go to America to drive trucks. Saurav Ganguly said to the selectors, I want Harbhajan in the team, period. Selector said, but he has been rusticated. Ganguly said, nothing doing. I want him. He's a match winning bowler, I know. And what happened? Harbhajan Singh scored 32. He took 32 wickets in 3 test matches and never looked back.
And I think that was the year when he got a term Turbonator, right?
Yes, Turbinator. Virender Sehwag, he made Virender Sehwag an opener. He told Virender Sehwag, look, I will give you 10. Don't worry. Even if you fail as opener, you will not be dropped. Armed with that confidence, Virender Sehwag went on to achieve remarkable things as opener. So Saurav Ganguly is easily the best captain we have had.
Right. And I will take the last two questions here.
Yeah.
Why is cricket always termed as a gentleman's game? I mean, with IPL, it's hardly a gentleman's game, but why it was called a gentleman's game? With IPL, it resembles more like more like the Gladiator Stadium, you know.
Yes, but there is no physical contact, and that it was for years and decades and centuries it was played in whites. And then there is a popular term in English also. It is not cricket, so it has always stood for values. And but I agree that IPL is gladiatorial. But yeah, it's okay. I mean, I feel good that my favorite sport is called a gentleman's game.
Right. Okay. I said last question, but I have to take this question. You know.
Yeah.
It's like that proverbial debate about which biryani is better, whether Lucknow biryani or Hyderabad biryani. So Brian Lara or Sachin Tendulkar, according to your view?
I would go for Sachin. I would go for Sachin because firstly he's Indian and secondly played for 24 years. 24 years at the international level. So in longevity wise also Sachin, and he played a lot of innings in both formats under pressure. Lara is an absolute legend, no doubt about that. Brilliant to watch. But Sachin, if you look at the entire gamut, Test cricket, one-day cricket, I think Sachin had more significant performances than Brian Lara. Brian Lara could not really do much to resurrect the West Indies team, which just kept declining. But Sachin had a lot to do with India's fortunes as a cricket team improving and doing well on foreign soil.
Right. So the last question for today from Anuj Gusai. Thanks for the wonderful presentation. If you have to pick top five, if you pick up top five cricketers from his entire cricketing history, who would they be? Top five. Five cricketers
I can only make my choice. So my choice obviously would be Sir Don Bradman, batting average of 99.9.
Indian cricketer.
Indian cricket, okay. Yeah. Indian cricket, it would be Sunil Gavaskar. It would be Kapil Dev, Sachin Tendulkar, Rahul Dravid. And then the last spot is very difficult. So I have included batsmen. I've included a bowler in Kapil Dev, an all-rounder. So just to ensure that all the departments are represented, I will go for Anil Kumble, spin bowler. So it is Sunil Gavaskar, Kapil Dev, Sachin Tendulkar, Rahul Dravid, Anil Kumble.
And no one from the current generation? Or
they're still playing, so let's give them.
Yeah. All right. It was a pleasure having you, Mr. Prabhu. Thank you so much for taking us.
My pleasure. Thank you. I hope everybody enjoyed it. Yeah.
We really enjoyed it. I'm sure everybody enjoyed it. I mean, we're getting lots of messages again. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful evening and stay safe and stay healthy. And the audience, lovely audience, please fill in the poll before leaving. Give us feedback so that we can get better. And don't miss our webinar tomorrow, which is on the active holiday options that is available in Nepal. This will be done by our Nepal office again at 3:30. Tune in at 3:25 so that you don't miss out on the webinar. Thank you so much, Mr. Prabhu.
Thank you. My pleasure. Thank you.
And thank you, everyone. Bye-bye. Stay safe, stay healthy. Bye.